Hi, I'm Stephanie Sebbing, the author of Quilt Addicts Anonymous.com, and today I'm going to be teaching you how to make half-square triangles from squares. This is a really great construction method because it sews on the bias, but while it's still intact, so it doesn't stretch out and warp on you and leave you with triangles where you have your points cut off or they're not in the right place. So the first thing you have to do is you have to cut two squares that are 1 inch larger than the finished size of your half-square triangle unit. So my finished size is 4 inches, so both of these squares are cut to 5 inches square. Now I'm taking my light fabric and I'm flipping it over so that the wrong side is facing up. Now I'm laying my ruler so that it's just to the side of the points, so that way I can make a line with my pencil from corner to corner. And you can use any pencil because it's on the wrong side and we're cutting over it eventually anyway. So now I'm laying my two pieces of fabric right sides together, just like we do every time we sew, and making sure that I'm matching my 2 points. Now I'm going to my sewing machine and I have it set up so that it's at 1/4 inch, and then I move my needle position over to the right 1 position, and that will give me a scant 1/4 inch. Now I'm lining the edge of my presser foot up with the line that we just drew, and that is going to act as your 1/4 inch guide. So you just sew all the way down using that line as your guide. And then when you reach the end, flip it around and go back the other way. Now, as you can see, we have 1/4 inch away from the drawn line on each side. We have a line of stitching. And now we're going to cut down the drawn line. And you just want to line your ruler up so that it's directly over the line. And then just cut it with your rotary cutter. And do make sure that you're not getting too close to the stitching line, because if you have too small of a seam here, then it will pop open when you put it on the long arm to quilt it. So now we have to press these open. And I always press so that the seam allowance is going to be underneath the dark side of the fabric. So I'm going to lay down my pieces so that the dark side is up. And I'm setting the seam right now, which just helps the stitching lay flat within the fabric. And because this is a bias, I always like to finger press this open first, and that helps keep the seam, the bias seam, from stretching out, which can be a big problem when you're piecing triangles. So I've got that pressed open. We got one more to do here, and then we're almost done. And when you press, you always want to start with your iron completely on the side of the fabric that you're pressing away from, and then just slowly drag your iron over. And then I kind of hold it in place for a little bit and press it down, and that gets a nice crisp seam without stretching anything out of place. So now all that's left to do is to trim the pieces to a 1/2 inch larger than your finished size. And it's a 1/2 inch larger because we still have a 1/4 inch seam allowance for when we put it into the quilt. So now I have a 6.5 inch ruler, and these are really helpful for when you're doing this. So remember, I have a 4 inch finished, so a 1/2 inch larger than that is 4.5 inches. So I have 4.5 inches and 4.5 inches, and I've lined my 45-degree line up with the edge of the seam here. And I'm making sure that I still have extra along all sides, so that way I'm not going to cut myself into a bind when I trim here. So now I'm just going to trim along the side and the top. You get that out of the way. And then do the same thing on the other side. This time, since I just cut these two edges, I'm going to line them up exactly with 4.5 and 4.5. And then my 45 degree is still lined up all along the seam line. and then we just cut on the side and the top again. And it's really tempting to skip this step, especially if you're making a lot of them, but this step is absolutely important in making sure that you have accurate piecing, because if you skip this step and you try to put everything together, then your points aren't going to show up where they need to go. So this is how you make a half square triangle from squares, and you get 2 of them from each square, so it goes really fast, and you'll have perfect points every time. So go to quiltaddictsanonymous.com for more tutorials and videos. Thank you, and happy quilting!